So there is the Financial Times. Last week they didn't include this one, not by the retail that we paid for the full £4 of the cover price of the Financial Times on Saturdays. And they've got a kind of explanation by the kind of overhyped Indian descended right winger on the main Stephen Fleet Street and on the BBC and ITV, who is called Janan Ganesh, and he is apparently an expert on the meaning of Maradona. Now, what is he going to say? Is a right-wing opportunist, careerist stooge. I mean, what possible meaning could he find and disclose about Maradona? All right, the main story on the Financial Times this Saturday, 28th of November 2020, is, of course, still, the Financial Times is still refusing to call him a crook. So it's a corporate kind of assignation or assignment or ascription, rather. Green's Arcadia teeters on the brink of collapse. Not that Green, the thief, has at last been forced to confess. What they're doing is, in effect, on the facts, reporting the facts of the confession. But they're not calling it that. Now, Philip Green's Arcadia is preparing to enter administration, putting hundreds of shops and more than 13,000 jobs at risk in what would be the biggest retail collapse of the pandemic so far. And it says that the group, whose brands include Topshop, Barton and Wallis, said that it was working on a number of contingency options. Now, they don't say that he is going to be prosecuted. Of course they don't. And that is what the capitalist law does. It rewards and protects and shields the criminals, big biz criminals like Philip Green, while it allows for mass evictions of people from their homes. Now that's the kind of immediate comparison. Green would not be losing any of his stolen billions, nor would Richard Branson, and nor did Robert Maxwell, in fact. And even after the disclosures that Maxwell was robbing the pension funds, looting the pension funds, none of his children lost anything, really. And so there is this obituary about Maradona. This piece is piece by Janan Ganesh. Is not in the obituary. It's of course in the magazine, but we shall be going to that in due course. And there is this confession, again, kind of withholding the real bite of the facts from the headline. It's the actual, as a result of Brexit, English farmers will be losing subsidy, big subsidy that they've been receiving from the European Union. And it says that they would be losing the subsidy in the next 4 years. Well, that's the beginning. And the Financial Times on page 4 says, under Middle East International, that Iran accuses Israel over scientist killing. Zionists in the last days of their Gamla allies seeking to intensify pressure on Iran and wage an all-out war. Well, there is a smaller item about Nicolas Sarkozy, the French criminal. Sarkozy appeared in court to fight allegations of corruption and influence peddling. Proceedings against the former president were delayed because of health problems affecting a co-defendant. The defendants all maintain their innocence. Of course they do. Now, the current French president, Emmanuel Macron, is doing his own corruption and lying. Because Macron has kind of fallen on the persistent pattern of blaming Muslims and attacking Muslims by blaming them and by inciting hatred against the Muslims in France. And the whole Financial Times is it's like tickling. It doesn't say it out front. It says God. So they're also running a few kind of topical pieces about the main posts that Joe Biden is filling with the potential cabinet. And they're doing a profile on Janet Yellen. The broad-minded pragmatist is expected to take up the top US economic post in a time of crisis, writes James Politi. Now, Politi sounds very much like a made-up name, political piece. So that would be a serious, significant kind of coincidence. Politi writing about politics in the US. And there is a cartoon in the Financial Times. All the buildings, city buildings, Now, these buildings look like New York, not London, because the skyline in London is yet to resemble that kind of squared shapes, tall buildings of New York. And the Financial Times is continuing its kind of tickling welcome to Joe Biden. And the headline is, "The grown-ups are back in charge in Washington." And there's a second editorial. That was the first editorial. And the second one is actually kind of similar to the contents of this one by Marion Somerset Webb on the markets. And there is an admission by the boss of the McDonald's chain, American McDonald's chain, who is quoted in 4 words: "Our menu is Darwinian." So they're saying that he has got a few things to confess to our state. And by lifting the ban on alcohol and reforming family law. And it says that this is aimed at attracting more expatriates, that is, Dubai people that are not returning to Dubai because of the ban on alcohol and various issues to do with the family law. There's a piece, there's a main piece about the pharmaceuticals, the big pharmaceuticals, and it's a propaganda war for the big pharmaceuticals. And the propaganda is given away in the headline: "Rehabilitating Big Pharma." And it's FT Big Read Coronavirus, and it says, "Often criticized for the pricing and marketing of its drugs, the speed at which the industry responded to the pandemic, producing 3 viable vaccines in 10 months, could change political and public opinion." And it's written by Sarah Neville and Hannah Kushla. Now, this is, of course, the Financial Times doing the big business propaganda. That's what we have been saying, and that's what it is doing. Rehabilitating Big Pharma. That's an absolutely corrupt and criminal kind of piece. It is not saying that Big Pharma is back in big time looting right across the world. That's what the Big Pharma is going to do, and is doing already. And that introduction, that the speed at which they kind of produce 3 viable vaccines, that is corrupt, and that is a barefaced lie, because it has not been tested. And it is, the speed is very suspect, because normal speed, normal length of time for producing a similar kind of vaccine would take years. And they haven't told the truth about why those years have been kind of capable of being kind of ignored, that length of time over which all kinds of experiments, tests and double tests and checks and double checks, triple checks have had to be made, because it's about people's lives being affected by this thing, the vaccine. Which is why there have been such widespread suspicion about the imposition of vaccines, not only about the fact that Bill Gates and other big time criminals have been involved for a very long time to foist a mass kind of inoculation by drugging people with all kinds of things in the contents of the vaccines. And the newspaper, the Financial Times, is not admitting that. And there is yet another big front page PR for Kate Middleton. I mean, she's being given more kind of promotion than Brenda the monarch herself and anybody else in the kind of monarchy. She's been given full front page and center page promotion by Fleet Street every day, either front page or in the center pages or similar. And the substance of what they're basing these promotions for Kate Middleton, the substance do not exist or does not exist. And there is this continuing diversion from the actual facts of the virus and the way that the virus moves from people to people and how to the various stages. As I have been saying, my expression has been A to Z of its operational activities. How does it travel? And what does it do while it is traveling from people to people and inside after affecting people? They're not covering that. Not the Financial Times, and more certainly not the Boris Graf. The Boris Graf is repeating the same line about Christmas, and this time it is about rail chaos. Now, of course, the Financial Times doesn't publish in anything as prominently or in detail as this one about the hundreds of billions of pounds being wasted, well, given to big business contractors under the cover of HS2. And HS2 is being promoted, as Rishi Sunak did in his so-called spending review, against the evidence that even before the COVID virus appeared in the UK, the cost of traveling on the railway system, as it has been, was prohibitive for many people. So railway transport is on the decline, and there are several reasons. The most obvious one is the cost of traveling. So if that is the case, then what would be the purpose of producing high-speed transport when the number of people who can afford to travel on high-speed railway line would be absolutely reduced to a point of negative income. That is to say, HS2 would be continuing to lose even after being put operational. What kind of economic sense is there? Economic sense in the kind of, okay, let's say the ordinarily capitalistic cost benefit. I mean, where is the cost benefit there? It's all cost and no benefit. And There is no diagnostic analysis by the Labour Party in Parliament of this. Not anything like the presentation by Emily Thornberry about Liz Truss's boasts about the deals with Japan. Okay, off to the Great Ormond Street and the prosecution of the porter aged 58. No, not age 58. He has offended. He has committed 58 child sex offenses. And he has admitted this as having been committed between 1985 and this year. So 1985, that is 15 years on the last century. And this 35 years, he has been a porter and has been committing child sex offenses for 35 years in the hospital. Think about that. And there is this headline. Absolutely the first headline that we have seen in the Boris graph. But of course, this is not telling the whole truth because it's blaming Diana as well. It is saying that Martin Bashir was responsible for Diana's death, but it's not saying that she was killed by other people. It is saying that she became paranoid herself. So she is partly to blame as well. And this is the interview that it appears that the chief reporter of the Boris graph has done an interview. Let's see who he's been talking to. Okay, it's a man called Alan Walla. He says that this Alan Walla now this is the man who is being described as being used, having been used by well, let's read the actual paragraph. Bashir, who used the claim about Mr. Walla to convince the princess to be interviewed by him on Panorama, was explaining to Simon Cowell. He agreed to perform only after concluding the program's researchers were honorable and truthful. Mr. Waller, the former head of security for the Earl Spencer, couldn't believe it. There was Bashir talking about honesty and truth, and I almost fell off the sofa. It was absolutely astonishing. In his first interview, Mr. Waller has now broken his silence over the deceit by Bashir, who 25 years on, he says, has destroyed his life. Quote, this man Bashir has become multimillionaire by using me. I am the fall guy, says Yanwala. Bashir has effectively stolen my identity, stolen my banking information, and then used it to frame me as the fall guy. That is exactly what he has done. He has framed me, thinking I would never find out. It has had a devastating effect on me. A quarter of a century earlier, Bashir, then a junior reporter on Panorama, had ordered a BBC freelance graphic artist to mock up fake bank statements that purportedly showed a £4,000 payment from a tabloid newspaper in a company owned by Mr. Walla. A second faked statement alleged that Mr. Walla also received £6,500 from an offshore company, with reports suggesting that it was designed to give the impression that this company was a front for MI5 or MI6, who were paying Mr. Walla to keep Diana under surveillance. Bashir's motive was clear: to make it look as if Mr. Walla was in the pay of the intelligence agencies and the tabloid press, selling information about the Earl and Diana. Bashir used the statements, not urged. Reading again that sentence. Bashir used the statements to persuade the Earl, that is Charles Spencer, Diana's younger brother, to give him access to his sister. The result was the only television interview she ever gave, in which she described Camilla Parker Bowles as the third person in her crowded marriage to the Prince of Wales. Mr. Walla now lives in a 2-bedroom flat on a pretty housing estate in the south of England with his wife and 11-year-old son. But it's a very far cry from the grand apartment on the Althorpe estate where he was living as head of Earl Spencer Security a year before Bashir perpetrated his hoax. Now aged 57, Mr. Walla had met Earl Spencer in Bosnia in the early 1990s. Mr. Walla was trying to set up orphanages in the war-torn Balkans, and the Earl, then a television reporter with Grenada, had made a short film about him. A photo shows them conversing on a scrubland in Bosnia, a bombed-out building in the background. Until the end of 1993, Mr. Walla, a former paratrooper in the British Army and a former US Marine, had been employed by Earl Spencer to protect him and the Northamptonshire estate. In March 1994, the Earl obtained a High Court injunction against Mr. Walla. The pair had been close friends, forbidding him from disclosing, publishing, or revealing to any party whomsoever information concerning the private lives, personal affairs, or private conduct of the Earl, his wife, children, or members of the royal family. The existence of the injunction was widely reported at the time, and Bashir, having worked on a Panorama investigation into the state of the monarchy, would have been well aware of it. It is unclear how Bashir obtained details of an account Mr. Walla held jointly with his then business partner Robert Harper in a company they set up called Vida Health and Fitness. But he took that information, including the account number and name and branch of the Bank National Westminster in Brighton, and mocked up a £4,000 payment from News International for March 1994, another £6,500 payment from a genuine offshore company, Penfolds Consultants, based in Jersey, which had featured in a previous investigation Bashir had conducted for Panorama on the business dealings of the former England manager Terry Venables. Bashir used a freelance graphic designer, Matthew Weisler, to carry out his dirty work. The account was genuine, but the payments were false. It is unclear why Penfolds was chosen for the second payment, but there is speculation that Bashir wanted to plant the idea that the company was a front for the intelligence agencies and ignite Diana's paranoia, making her more vulnerable to agreeing to the interview request. So we shall not be completing the rest of it. It's 1/4 of the text that we have read here. Essentially, this is about Bashir and how he lied and deceived people and forged and whatever. But this is more than that, because as the reports have suggested in the last 4 weeks, the BBC covered up Bashir's lies. Whether or not Diana actually was influenced by the forgery is not important. What is important is the fact that Bashir forged the documents, and that the BBC, including the latest Director General, not the one currently in post, but the one that was currently in post before the current one took over, Tony Hall, who was a BBC executive and who was given the charge immediately after Diana's brother raised questions about Bashir. And it was Tony Hall that carried out or fronted the so-called internal investigation by the BBC about the allegations about Bashir. And Tony Hall covered it up. That is the important thing. And the man then went on to become the Director General of the BBC. And Tony Hall has been Director General when the BBC has distorted very serious evidence about the many crimes and criminal behavior and criminality, including the lies perpetrated by the Brexiteers and other lies and deceit and corruption that went on and have been going on in the BBC. So that is the more significant question now. Whether Diana, this is the whole page given by the Boris Kraft to that story, the Alan Vela and the forgery. And what has happened is that this will be another inquiry. Let's predict this will be another inquiry and nothing will change. I mean, Tony Hall is not going to pay for hiding and covering up after the facts, and nobody else will be. If there is going to be any kind of person identified for this. It will be either Bashir or somebody who is not central in executive positions in the BBC. Now, this is the picture from the big front page picture of Kate Middleton. They've got her, they've given her a whole page again. And it's not like Kate Middleton has died or left the royal family, but they're treating her as if she's died. And it's the kind of completely poisonous, super right-wing liar called Camilla Tomini. She is saying this is Kate's legacy. She's making a lasting difference. What is the Kate legacy? And it is claiming that it is offering children a better start. One of the greatest challenges we face, says Duchess. How is she making any difference at all? So what they're doing, they're inventing a persona and a role around Kate Middleton, based mainly on the initiatives, social initiatives that Meghan Markle has made. But contrary to this kind of saint-like promotion, the Boris Graf and others have been maligning Meghan Markle for coming up with ideas and projects and so forth, and having had a background in social projects during years before she even met Harry. Now, this picture of Kate Middleton with a grateful-looking black child, black girl, it must be a black girl that is African origin rather than Asian origin or Asian background. It's like the display that is doubly offensive because Meghan Markle is half African origin, and she has been condemned by the very Boris Graf for that, because that is what they don't want accepted as normal for the remnant of the British monarchy. And yet they're stealing it. They're stealing the very thing and exhibiting Kate Middleton, who is widely suspected of being among the poisonous sources against Meghan Markle. And they're giving her credit, Kate Middleton credit, for things that Meghan Markle has been doing a lot of. And they are writing without any kind of surprise in it. This piece about a licensed law trader, or a pair of licensed law traders. Now there is, before we go there is on page 12 of the Telegraph, Boris Graf, a kind of promotion for the cruel and deadly kind of vets who are protesting that pet owners are pestering them to a dark place. Now that will be not one, but a number of editions of this program, we shall be discussing the licensed massacre of cats and dogs and other animals by the licensed vets in this country. And we shall do that by explaining that there is nothing in the legal kind of system that protects the victims, the animals, or has any consideration for the impact these massacres and mass killings of the pets have on the lives of the bereaved owners and carers of the animals. Now this leads us, it's the same one. Phoebe Southworth is writing another piece. This one is former Freshfields partner wins appeal against ruling that his conduct breached professional standards. Now this is something that they're celebrating. This Phoebe Southworth is celebrating, at least. She seems to be on the inside. And it says, the start of the sentence, the paragraph says, a city lawyer should not have been fined for having sex with a junior colleague because the tribunal strayed too far into his private life, a high court has ruled. Ryan Beckwith was ordered to pay £35,000 after a tribunal in January 2020 found he failed to act with integrity and brought the profession into disrepute following a sexual encounter with a junior colleague in July 2016. He brought an appeal against the Solicitors Regulation Authority, arguing that the Solicitors Disciplinary Tribunal was wrong to have concluded his conduct had breached principles set out in an official standards handbook for the profession. In a ruling published yesterday, 2 High Court judges have overturned the tribunal's decision, finding that the professional rules may reach into private life only when conduct that is part of a person's private life realistically touches on his or her practice of the profession or the standing of the profession. Now, we shall be going into Ryan Beckett. Is it Ryan Beckwith? Beckwith. We shall be going into the ruling in his favor by the High Court shortly. Let's check the kind of reference, if there is any. All right, there is a long piece. So what we shall do, we shall be looking at the ruling in the High Court yesterday, that is, it's dated the 27th of November 2020. So we shall look at this and we shall then bring up to date the behavior of the High Court in relation to a number of claims that our campaign, our movement, as represented by myself, has been seeking to have proceeded with in the High Court for the last several years. And it involves not just a ruling about a few £1,000s, but it involves the loss and losses in monetary terms alone, and that is not the only area and dimension of losses involved in the actions that we have been claiming against the various defenders. It involves and entails hundreds of billions. Yes, hundreds of billions, and it is related to the trillions that we have estimated and we have been claiming in the commentary, in the description, in the analysis. And the Boris graph, which has got several sections: rugby, Saturday magazine, travel, money, and the money is featured or is featuring, and books for Christmas, which is a section of the review. And the Saturday magazine, which we call magazine, is not in the format of a magazine. It's this one we are talking about, this magazine. It has got articles, and it's a very, the Boris graph, both the daily Boris graph and the Sunday Boris graph, these are racist titles. And they've got a Richard Medley now as Agony Uncle. His record, Richard Medley's record is what we are referring to. And his record is that of a racist who is in denial of the realities of society. And they've got another piece for Kate Middleton on page 11. It's a piece by Shane Watson, People Watching. It's a promotion for the child and the dog that Wills and his family have lost. And there is a lot of articles for the bourgeoisie, and it's on the same scale, same kind of level. It's got 28 pages there, and it's the same level as the Financial Times, which has got the kind of magazine formatted magazine called How to Spend It. And the I newspaper is still kind of giving a comfortable promotion for the crook, Philip Green, and they're not blaming him. They're saying that his group, it's a different thing, entity-wise. Company law and capitalism. That's the kind of concept that I became fascinated by after reading about the title of his book, by the Irish kind of law academic Tom Hedden in the 70s that I think was one of the main known kind of comments or examination of the corrupt legal system in England, that is company law. And it's not just the company law that is corrupt, but the company coverage by the Fleet Street is corrupt as well. So it's cover up. They never talked about how this so-called kind of, what's her name, supermodel, Kate Moss, became physically, for about 10 years, Kate Moss was photographed physically kind of touching and being touched by Philip Green. I mean, what was that about? How did that happen? Because the papers published the images and never asked the question why this was going on. And they did that for years and years and years before it was forced on them to start publishing itsy bitsy references to the fact that the crook Philip Green, was a sexual molester and abuser of women. So Fleet Street is very sick. There is no part of Fleet Street that is not sick. And the I newspaper, instead of thanking Harry and Meghan Markle for giving the Frogmore cottage to Andrew's daughter and her husband, they're celebrating the line that is the final farewell. Instead of thanking Meghan and Harry for showing generosity, what they are celebrating is good riddance. Now contrast that with the endless hype of the wife of Wills, of course. And today's hype is two pages, front page, big picture. The main space on the front page of the Boris Graph is taken up by the big picture of Kate Hamilton. And then they've got a whole picture by Camilla Tomini and the rest of them. The whole page given to painting Kate Hamilton as a saint. And the I newspaper is lying about the tiers, the 3 tiers, TIERS, tiers that Johnson is trying to impose on the coronavirus, the lockdown, 3 tiers of the lockdown. And they've got a picture on page 10 of the older brother of Jeremy Corbyn, the Piers Corbyn, who is facing trial over breaking the lockdown. And they're saying without any kind of condition or question, they're saying that hundreds of thousands of Hong Kong people are going to be allowed to migrate to the UK. No shock horror by the Daily Mail or the Boris Graph or the scum. It's just normal. Contrast that with the outrage that they express when one child or a family are forced into seeking crossing the channel, English and French channel, in search of a asylum or refuge in Britain. And this piece about the hundreds of thousands of Hong Kong people being allowed, this piece in the I newspaper doesn't mention the United Nations. And it doesn't recognize the Refugee Convention. So it's not like the UK government doesn't recognize the various conventions and treaties that it remains signed up to. Even Fleet Street doesn't. And not even the likes of the I newspaper, which have been claiming to be less racist and less Little English and less Brexiteering than the rest. That kind of denial and that pretension is a typical corrupt, racist, sick-making denial and false information fed to the gullibles, millions of gullibles over the years, over decades, over hundreds of years by Fleet Street. Now, this is what we are talking about. What is this picture about? This is a picture as authentic as it can be of Philip Green buying the services, the body of Kate Moss. This is in today's Daily Star. So Kate Moss was acting as a prostitute. She prostituted her body to Philip Green, who was paying her. Because they never said that they had a personal relationship. So what was this? What could possibly be this picture about? Other than the fact that he had paid her millions while he was looting the companies. And this two-page spread is typical tabloid trash. And they're saying in the editorial, the headline, this is the headline that actually calls green rather than the company on the brink. And they're saying that Philip Green is the snake oil salesman of the worst kind, but they still don't have any comment to make about why Kate Moss, the so-called supermodel, is pictured in that way, grabbing her that closely by the snake oil salesman of the worst kind. Isn't that wrong? And they've got it does they don't say it's corrupt, but it is corruption. They're saying that a backhand lolly for Johnson's crony. And they're saying that Boris Johnson has been accused of trying to secure a £90,000 post for a close pal of fiancée Carrie Simons. The Prime Minister faces accusation of cronyism after his apparent bid to appoint former talk radio journalist Ross Kempsell as Conservative Director of Research. A Tory headquarters source said Ross Kempsell is a political novice without the background and serious political thinking needed to lead Conservative Research Department. It takes more than being chums with the Prime Minister and his partner. It would be outrageous to get rid of Ian like this. Now, Ian is the one that has been replaced. Mr. Carter, that is Ian Carter, that is, headed the CRD and was in charge of the Conservative Party's media machine when Miss Simons quit as the Tories' Director of Communications after she was challenged over her expenses. Pals denied she left over the row. Now, this is a kind of unintended kind of confession that Carrie Simons actually lied about her expenses. And as a result of the row that followed, she left the Conservative Central Office. And then it continued. The Miss Simons was also said to be key in the departure of Dominic Cummings from number 10. Yesterday, it emerged Mr. Cummings' ally, Cleo Watson, had quit as head of the Prime Minister's priorities and campaigns. A Tory spokesman said, "We do not comment on staffing matters." Ms. Simmons has been contacted for comment, but of course she will not comment. When it says so-and-so has been contacted for comment, normally it means that those persons have not commented. And there are other items. And absolutely stuffed full of tabloid trash. And we say that despite the fact that they're running a page about how in Argentina, Maradona's kind of next ritual about him, his funeral, and has been kind of made out of bounds for ordinary people because the fans are uncontrollable. So it has been declared a private affair. And there is a 2-page spread on the Iranian nuclear scientist who was shot dead near Tehran yesterday. There is a piece about journalists. Now, this is something that is worth examining. A police force will pay £875,000 damages to 2 journalists and has apologized unreservedly for arresting them in early morning raids in an attempt to unmask their sources. That's the police service of Northern Ireland. Amazing. Never happens in England. And there is a short kind of introduction to the woman that is going to be Joe Biden's ambassador to the UK. She is the widow with a sting in her tail. She is, of course, McCann's, the Republican Senator McCann's widow. She is the widow with a sting in her tail, and her renunciation of Donald Trump was a factor in helping to deliver the presidency to his rival, Joe Biden. Now, Cindy McCain, widow of Senator John McCain, a senator for Arizona, is a frontrunner to become the ambassador to London. Mrs. McCain, an Anglophile, is credited by the Democrats with helping to turn the state of Arizona from red to blue. And this kind of thing is going to go on, for the next 2 months. Because there will be dozens and dozens of names put forward as kind of candidates for various positions in the new Biden administration. And there is a whole group picture of the prostitutes that Philip Green paid to appear in photo calls with him. These are prostitutes, they're super women. The only reason they're there is because he paid them. I mean, this is completely sick, and they don't examine the total prostitution of these people. And there are relentless promotion for the vaccine. Except this piece, which is a headline, that is more kind of realistic. It says that freedom at Christmas, that is freedom to mix under the banner of Christmas, may double infections, say scientists. But they don't go far enough, because the real evidence of how this thing works is what is being withheld and not being kind of shared with the readers of the tabloid. And that includes even by the Times. Now, can you imagine a man who was once valued at 200 million pounds, has been declared bankrupt and has been evicted with debts of 14 million pounds? I mean, how does he lose 200 million and incur debts of 14 million pounds? And it says the beginning is absolutely kind of topical. Even by the brutal standards of big business and the political arena, it is a spectacular fall from grace. Lord Magan, M-A-G-A-N, it's almost like make America great again to the nth degree. Magan, Maga to Magan, Lord Magan of Castletown, a former Tory party treasurer who owned one of Ireland's grandest estates, has been declared bankrupt. His debts are estimated at 14 million pounds, and his marriage appears to be over. A search for any surviving assets has begun after the financier, once estimated to be worth 200 million pounds, claimed to be penniless. Castletown Cox, one of Ireland's great Palladian mansions, and which had 30 million pound art collection, has been sold with its 513-acre estate in County Kilkenny. The PR's 6 million home in Kensington, West London, has also been sold, and his wife, Lady Magan, 73, has tried to have him jailed for concealing financial documents. Remember the financial document concealment by Tatiana Akhmedova, the divorced wife of the Russian Ahmed, and her case against her son, Timur, for concealing documents that are central as evidence in her claim for £500 million against her ex-husband. So the documents and the worth of the value that they attach, or the impact and they kind of represent, is at the center or are at the center of our claims of billions of pounds against these particular criminals in the long-going history of the claims. That we started in 2011. There is a piece in the Times on page 27 saying the Eton teacher sacked in row over toxic masculinity video. And the theme of the leaders, British leaders, having their heads in the clouds or in the sand, has been a recurring one in the Times columns. Melanie Phillips and others have done this, and of course Matthew Paris. Now Paris is saying anyone who remembers the British Leyland debacle will shudder at the astronomical sums likely to be blown on one web. And let's read the first two paragraphs. Ground control to Major Dom. Your circuit's dead. There is something wrong. Can you hear me, Major Dom? Now, the Major Dom is a reference to Dominic Cummings. And the second paragraph is, a sovereign nation needs a sovereign space capability. Discuss not least because the British cabinet hasn't. Rishi Sunak cannot have. Boris Johnson never does. And it's your money they are almost literally throwing into the air. Now, this kind of phrase, your money they are literally throwing into the air, shows the criminal complicity, collusion and capitulation with these so-called politicians by the so-called critic like the Matthew Paris. Because he's not actually writing this to expose these to critical accountability. He's writing this as a kind of jobbing piece, jobbing topical thing, so that he, as a columnist, as a thinker, is treated as being interested in and concerned about deep issues of principle. Nothing could be farther from the truth. Because if you are actually doing the principle thing, really objectively defined principles, he would not be writing more than one column. But he has been a professional column writer for the Times for years and years and years. And there is no alternative to the likes of him. No more qualified than him, not morally superior than him, not socially just as opposed to his socially unjust kind of role. It's a very small, racist, and in denial cabal that is Fleet Street. And the likes of Matthew Paris form the central core of that cabal. And when they lie as a cabal. They don't expose one another. They don't expose the actual evidence. They don't expose the denial, systematic denial of the many by the few. And they serve the few. And they kind of spew the variously dressed, variously kind of dressed up images for the few, who pat them on the back, keep them in their jobs, so-called, and keep them happily linked with their banks. And this is probably the only confession by these scum about the scheming Colleen Rooney, who had a spy disguised as a friend and a colleague of Rebecca Vardy. We shall be talking about that in due course, especially as part of the role of the Queen's Bench Division in the High Court in actually accepting applications for defamation and libel. And we shall be updating our commentary on the claims by David Neuberger made in January 2017 that once Brexit was done, London would become the center of the world's potential litigants seeking to resolve their disputes, emerging numbers. I mean, Neuberger in January 2017 was about to retire when he conceived the idea of saying that kind of thing, which cannot have been conceived without some consultation with David Lidington. Now, Lidington at that time in January 2017 was in post as the cabinet member for Theresa May's cabinet, as the member involved as the boss of the judiciary, so-called Ministry of Justice. And Lidington, despite being a non-kind of lawyer, I'm not talking about non-licensed law trader, but I'm talking about non-lawyer, meaning that his ignorance of the law was as deep as his lack of honesty to the public. Because although he claimed in the period since the so-called referendum of June 2016 that he had voted against the UK coming out of the EU, his behavior, his language, his analysis, his kind of imagery, and his condescending attitude towards the people asking for accountability by the Theresa May regime, accountability, showed that David Lidington was like the son of the actress who was an MP for Hampstead. I mean, Hodges is probably one of the worst examples of what the private lie calls liquor. I mean, Dan Hodges, although politically he may not ever agree with his mother, but he is known as the son of his mother. And he is uncouth, shameless, without any remorse, without any sense of honesty and integrity. When he sucks up to the serial liars, right-wingers, and takes the cash or the shilling from the liars of the Mail on Sunday. And they are using the word against Philip Green, that is true. And Gary Lineker is given 2 pages of spread. And they're saying that a British Airways hostess, Stuart Air hostess, is selling sex by advertising sex between the flights. And they're talking about the COVID kind of measures by Boris Johnson as grim. And as I said, this is the Gary Lineker 2 pages. So that shows that it's not just the BBC, but even the Murdoch, that is the rival to the BBC, that would treat Gary Lineker as a kind of money generating kind of token of business, if given half the chance. And the scum is saying that the Black Friday was a flop, but it says that in Wales the shops are packed and there is online kind of trade booming. Now, it will be noticeable what we are finding in the papers, Fleet Street, and what is missing. There is a lot of diversionary items, but there is no reference to the actual operation of the virus. And there is no scrutiny of how these big business farmers produce this fast 10 months. They say 10 months. But I'm saying it's less than 10 months because they weren't even talking about vaccine, at least publicly, until halfway into the first kind of lockdown. So it's not 10 months, it's even 5 months or 6 months. And there is a piece by this person, Jenny Starner, saying that at the end of a year as traumatic as this one, we will all do whatever is necessary to banish it and celebrate our survival. Now that's the general line being taken by Fleet Street and the kind of mainstream, as it were, media. They're not talking about the evidence. They're not talking about the actual operation of the virus. And they're not talking about anything to do with safety. Now, this absence, now this is the 11th month. Let's say the virus has appeared, reportedly appeared from, let's say, February in the UK. Now, in the, let's say, 10 months of mainstream so-called reporting, Fleet Street has completely and utterly failed or intentionally suppressed the truth about the virus and about its operations in the UK, about the rest of the world. All the superfluous, diversionary items about itsy-bitsy topics and showbiz and all that, those are kind of pretexts and excuses and covers for hiding the truth about this pandemic. And every day, thousands of people are kind of getting infected every day. And there is a confession here in the headline, that is, whether it's written by Gove or not is another matter. And it says that lockdown was the only way to stop the NHS being broken. Now, on The Guardian, of course, they're talking about the wealth of Rishi Sunak's wife. In fact, it's the wealth of her father, the Indian co-founder of the digital kind of giant called Infosys. And she's credited, or at least reported, to be owner of shares, her own shares in the company Infosys, worth 430 million pounds, making her one of the wealthiest women in Britain, with a fortune larger than the Queen, that is Brenda. And it's a piece headlined "Revealed." So what they're claiming in The Guardian is that this is an exclusive. There's a piece byline to a woman called Juliet Garside. There was a woman called Garside from Southeast London in the 1980s who was a Labour Party member, probably from Lewisham, and was a Labour Party member on the Inner London Education Authority. So Garside was a right-winger. It is yet to be found whether this Garside is related to the other Garside, because Garside is Very uncommon name among Fleet Street or among the ordinary public that I have noticed. So they're saying Sunak faces questions over family fortune. Now that is one of the easiest things to say for the Guardian. And it says that this is kept out of the declaration of minister's interests or ministerial interests. Let's put it this way. Has any conservative, especially right-wing conservative, lost their job as a result of breaking the ministerial code? Not in the recent past, and not particularly starting from Priti Patel. Now, Priti Patel is the other kind of cabinet minister who has been under demands for kind of being sacked. Various things she has not disclosed, including the private meetings she had with members of the foreign or of a foreign government without declaring them. And the Daily Mirror kind of like shielding the legacy of Robert Maxwell, in fact, by not publishing picture of the crook with Kate Moss and the others. Instead, the Mirror is choosing to put on the front page the thief and his wife and his daughter. And Helen Mirren is reportedly saying she's old and she looks it, and that's just fine. And there is a 2-page spread on the virus in the Mirror. It's a trendy kind of headline that would please its market. It's a topically written headline and presented, displayed headline without any substance really. Because again, the main space is given to various kind of politically, strategically conceived propaganda titles, propaganda assertions, not the evidence of how this virus thing affects people. And that relates to the fact that the media, Fleet Street, for 70 plus years since the National Health Service was founded, has failed, as it is failing today, to spell out the real behavior of the NHS in terms of the funds and in terms of actually serving the people at the point of need, really serving, not neglecting people, not treating them with cruelty, not kind of treating them in a way that they will disappear by negligent kind of denial of their existence in various institutions. And there is a continuing coverage of the celebrity kind of Big Brother, whatever, or get me out of there, Shane and AJ and all that. And they're talking about Philip Green in the editorial, the Daily Mirror, saying pity feels poor staff that the kind of bankruptcy is going to cause thousands of people working in his shops. And they're all of them still in denial. They're not calling him a crook, a thug, and a looter and a criminal. None of them is calling for his prosecution. And Carol Moron is continuing her hatred of Meghan Markle. Carol Moron is not talking about 14,000 people or thereabouts who are going to lose their jobs because of Philip Green's criminality and criminal bankruptcy.